What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Brand Partial Show. So let's get into it. Let's talk NFL draft. So yeah, one of the biggest risers right now, Darius Robinson, edge rusher out of Missouri. You kind of look and you're like, Darius Robinson, like, who is this guy? You're like, there's always one of these guys that rises in the draft process you're not familiar with, even if you follow college football pretty closely. So that was me. I was like, who? I was like, Darius Robinson, edge rusher, Missouri. And you think it's kind of like what I talked about Jacob Cowing from Arizona, why he's not getting as much hype as he probably should, because you think like edge rusher Missouri. I'm thinking like, you think this guy, how good can this guy really be? I haven't really heard of him. He's not from Alabama, he's not from Georgia, he's not from Florida State, he's not from one of these top defensive teams. How good can this guy really be? But I'm watching Darius Robinson highlights last night, and I watched his game against Georgia, and I'm like, dang, this guy's pretty good. And you watch, and there's just like aggression, speed. When he tackles people, he wants to make people feel it. So Darius Robinson, because I get sucked in. Sometimes you just get sucked into the top guys, whether it's Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, Braylon Trice, some of the top edge rushers. You just get sucked in. You forget about, to watch some of these guys like Darius Robinson. But yeah, I think Chop Robinson getting a little bit of overhype. I think Chop Robinson, has a skill set where he could be pretty solid in the NFL. But yeah, I think Darius Robinson's rising because I think he has some upside. I think his upside might be on par, or at least on par, or could be on par, I should say, with Dallas Turner, Braylon Trice, Laiatu Latu. So yeah, keep an eye on this guy. The consensus board has him mocked number 29 of the Lions, so that's why I was really intrigued to watch his tape. And just like you're thinking, like, because sometimes you watch mock drafts this time of year and you see some guys that names you're not familiar with at the end of the first round. You're like, who is this guy? Maybe I have to go back and watch his tape. Darius Robinson's certainly that guy, and went back and that Georgia game, he was giving Georgia some problems. The speed to power, strong hands, can get off of blocks. Really, it just has a natural feel for rushing the quarterback, and really can rush when he is rushing the quarterback. He has you can see kind of that. Well, you can't see it in his eyes, but you can tell that he really salivates to get after the quarterback. And not even just that, he really salivates just to get after people. And he's a guy that I think would fit really well in Detroit. I think he'd be a guy that'd be good opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I think, Atlanta's a team that could use an edge rusher, Arizona. So, you feel like those three teams, Arizona, Detroit, Atlanta, edge rush needy teams. I guess every team could use an edge rusher, but those three teams you feel like are going to take an edge rusher at some point in the draft, and it could be early. It could be first, second round. So Darius Robinson, this is a guy, I bet the more I watch him, the more I might almost want to pencil him in as my number 3 edge rusher. But as it stands right now, Dallas Turner 1, Braylon Trice 2, Laiatu Latu 3. I think that's a little bit away from the consensus. The consensus has Jared Verse 2. I would have Verse probably 4 or 5. To me, Jared Verse, like I talked about, Darius Robinson, or Braylon Trice and Darius Robinson, guys that I really like. My number 2 or Robinson, or I don't know where I would rank Robinson. I'm starting to really dive into his tape now. I'm talking how much I like him, but it's like I talked about guys who before this year weren't getting top 10 hype. Sometimes that can really affect them. Like Jared Verse was getting talked about as a top 3, top 5 pick. I think that's why this year, even though he didn't have as good of a year, that's why it's hard for him to, as far as in the media's eyes, I don't know what the scouts and the NFL evaluators think is going to be the end-all, be-all of where he goes. But to me, sometimes when the guys get the top 3, top 5 pick hype prior to a season, it's hard for them to really fall off. Obviously, we do see that happen, but it's pretty rare. Like, you remember last year, or was this last year or 2 years ago? I think it was last year's draft. Kayshon Boutte was a guy that was getting mocked in first rounds in the year prior to the 2022 season. And he ended up where did he fall? At number 6 round of the Patriots. So you see some guys do get kind of the first round hype. But as far as like if you get, I'll stay with this point, or I'll keep hammering this point away. Yeah, if you get a guy that's projected top 3, top 5, it's very hard for him to slip out, or you very rarely see him slip out of the top 15, top 20 next year. And if he does, he usually comes back to school. there's definitely, I can't think of any on the top of my head, but there's definitely examples of that. But yeah, I keep seeing videos and people talking about Laiatu Latu, just what, how good he actually is and just like what skill set he brings. And I'm thinking like, he is fascinating just because like he's fascinating because I don't love his movement skills. I don't think his movement skills are great, but you watch him and you're just like the strength, the power, a natural feel for rushing the quarterback, ability to drop in coverage and even come down with interceptions. I know ideally that's not what you want him to do in the NFL, but he can do that. Just all these things that Laiatu Latu does, and he just does them at a high level. So yeah, a fan of this guy's game. He's a guy that just gets it. And a guy that's, transferred, started his career at Washington and college, has a lot of experience playing college football. I think he's just a guy that now in his sixth year now, a guy that just gets it. A guy that just understands the position, I think, has got a really bright future. I think he's going to do a lot of great things in the NFL. So yeah, Laiatu Latu, the strength, power elements to his game certainly there, and then the natural feel for rushing a quarterback and just consistency too, game in and game out. You watch his tape; it's giving offensive linemen problems, using his strength and power, like I reiterated, and just being a presence out there, kind of like Braylon Trice. That's why I like him and Laiatu Latu. These are guys that even in the NFL level, even if they don't light up the stat sheet, these are guys that are going to always just make plays. They're always going to be disruptive. So that's why I really like these guys. But yeah, I mean, you look at the wide receiver class. Wide receiver class is deep. This is a high-end wide receiver class. I've been saying that for a while. You look at like Keon Coleman's now the consensus 6'7" wide receiver. That's kind of crazy. What's happened? I guess my question is just what sometimes these guys are guys as draft stock fall, and you kind of just like wonder why. I guess when you think about it, Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, I think it's safe to say based on what they did this past season, should be ahead of Keon Coleman. But why is Keon Coleman so far down? Like, shouldn't he still be in at least top 4, top 5 consideration? But yeah, I think Coleman still probably goes high, like second round. I think it's more just a testament to how good this wide receiver class. Like, I think, Coleman might be, I don't think, he probably won't be the third or fourth receiver off the board, but could he be a guy where he's like could he guy that still be the fifth or sixth receiver off the board and the team still really like him? Like, for example, remember the year there was, Justin, there's a couple of drafts where there was really a lot of good receivers. With the draft of, Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, you had a draft like that where, you look at like who and Henry Ruggs too. I know that didn't work out, and you look at like, I think was Jefferson the third. He might have been the third receiver off the board because I can't remember. He was the third or fourth receiver off the board. But you look at Jefferson, and obviously you know how it turned out. But you look at like, there's no reason, or I would say no reason at the time. You look at like the Vikings took him in the third receiver off the board, and people are thinking like, yeah, Justin Jefferson, good receiver, national title team. You're thinking, yeah, it's got to be pretty good. Turns into a superstar. So I guess the point is, even though Keon Coleman's the fifth receiver, there's still even though he's the fifth, sixth consensus receiver, even though people are kind of pushing back on where he should be ranked, he certainly has the traits to develop into a superstar. So I guess that's kind of the main point I wanted to get at with Keon Coleman. But yeah, Marvin Harrison, I think, how good can Marvin Harrison be? I think, it reminds me of A.J. Green, Julio Jones. I think he's got a chance to be one of those guys, a guy that you draft and you're just like, yep, you're just so confident that this guy is going to succeed. That's what I kind of, looking back, I know I was younger back then. I was 8th grade, 9th grade. This is before I, really studied football a lot. I was big into football, mostly college football, but I watched Julio Jones, AJ Green, and that's before I was scouting highly, and I didn't realize kind of the traits these guys had, and I didn't realize they were going to be surefire, NFL top end level guys. But that's kind of you kind of get vibes of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a guy where, as good as the scouts have gotten, and as good as that, I guess the media for the most part has gotten at really, hyping up with social media, hyping up guys with high end level traits like Marvin Harrison. I think that's why Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to succeed in the NFL, and not just succeed, turn into a superstar. And it's not, there is no kind of, I think that's what's interesting about, you look at the NFL draft. I think that's why, like, even going back to, like, even when, like, the 2011, 2012 draft when Andrew Luck came out, that was before social media was really, it's crazy to think, that was only like 12, 13 years ago, before social media was really as big as it is now. There was hype, around Andrew Luck, but it wasn't like, could you imagine if Andrew Luck was coming out this year? There would be like, oh man, generational talent, just, all over social media. I think that's the thing with Marvin Harrison has certainly benefited not only from having his father play in the NFL, but having just social media just, talking about him, just bombarding him with great things. So it's almost like these scouts, GMs, unless they live under a rock, because I know NFL scouts and GMs do their own board, but unless they live under a rock, it's hard to not hear about like Marvin Harrison Jr. If you're, I don't know, if you're Brad Holmes or if you're Howie Roseman, whatever GM is whatever GM you're a fan of, you got to believe they've heard Marvin Harrison Jr.'s name. You got to believe they've heard Caleb Williams' name. I think, even though the NFL teams don't like to discuss this, for example, Will Johnson, Harold Perkins are guys for next year's draft. Even though GMs don't necessarily like to look at that, you want to focus 1 year at a time, one draft at a time. A lot of times GMs and coaches are taking things one day at a time. But you also hear about some of these guys in the future. Like, did the Bears hear about, like, the Bears probably maybe they won't want to admit it necessarily. Maybe ego will kind of get in the way, but if you hooked them up to Robert De Niro's lie detector test, there'd be like, hey, were you guys hearing about Caleb Williams last year? Were those thoughts crossing your mind? Because they obviously don't want to say that, because they don't want to like throw shade at Justin Fields, and they don't want to act like they had replacing Justin Fields in their mind. But I'm sure they had thought about Caleb Williams. I'm sure they'd seen him on TV, because some of these NFL guys, I don't think they watch a lot of college football, but I think they do watch a little bit of college football. And, like I said, they don't live under a rock. So Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers, these are names that, people hear about. Even J.J. McCarthy, too, especially since he won a national championship. So these NFL people are hearing about these guys. And, the presence of social media has really amplified how much hype they get and how much, hype and excitement fans get when they draft him. Because, like, let's say, like, the Chargers take Marvin Harrison. Like, if you're a fan of the Chargers, you're just like that's a pick where the fan base is just going to go crazy, because for so many years you followed what Marvin Harrison Jr. I say for so many years, for a couple of years you followed what he's done, and last year people are talking like, last year people are talking about Jalen Carter, some of the top headlines of last year's draft, and people are saying, this draft's not as good, but wait till next year, Marvin Harrison. So people already had it kind of ingrained in their mind, if you will, that Marvin Harrison was going to be a superstar this year. So, yeah, a lot of excitement where Marvin Harrison goes. And, he's one of the kind of the surefire guys that should go top 5. I think what's interesting about Harrison Jr. in this draft is, like, quarterbacks should go 1, 2, or quarterbacks could go 1, 2, 3, 4. And whoever that 5th spot is, I forget who does have the 5th pick. Is it the Jets? But even if they choose not to pick there, you got to believe that Harrison's such a coveted talent that the team that picks 5th that even if the team that picks 5th doesn't necessarily, he's not high on their list of guys to draft, you got to believe a team will make a trade, because Marvin Harris, because that's just that'll create kind of the scarcity of, like, there might be a team, like, I don't even know an example of a team, but could be a team picking, like I don't. Let's say Atlanta. Like Atlanta is receiver necessarily high on their list of needs. I know edge rusher, but I'm just thinking. I'm just using Atlanta as an example because they're picking. I know they are the 8th pick. Could they move up at number 5? Are they a team that just loves Marvin Harrison? They move up to 5, and now you got Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. Could you just like create a scenario where you just have high end elite skill players? I think edge rusher Dallas Turner is a perfect fit there, but I'm just saying it could happen there. If quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, don't be surprised if a team trades up to number 5 that is drooling. There's just, I guess, they're mouth watering to get Marvin Harrison. But yeah, Malik Neighbors, I talk about having Malik Neighbors as the 2nd overall receiver is kind of unfair to him. That's what's too bad about draft rankings is some people are like, Marvin Harrison's number 1 if we don't get, and we're picking in the top 5, top 10. If we don't get Marvin Harrison, it's a disappointment. No, you gotta really have an open mind in this case that, say it because the Giants are an example of a team that could take Malik Neighbors. Say it and Harrison goes 4th or 5th, and then the Giants take Malik Neighbors. If you're a big NFL fan who's who's really a non-existent college football fan, because there's fans out there like that, you'd be like, oh yeah, we got Malik Neighbors, but we didn't get Marvin Harrison, and then that guy won't watch any tape, and he'll go into the season, and he'll be like, yeah, that's Malik Neighbors, that's a guy we drafted, number 2 receiver. But the fans the big-time NFL fans who are casual college football fans most likely will take the time to watch Malik Neighbors' tape and watch his highlights and be like, wow, we didn't get Marvin Harrison, but we got a guy that, this guy's electric after the catch. This guy's got really good speed. This guy had a phenomenal season at LSU and was a key part of why their offense was so explosive and one of the best in college football. So you have kind of those fans that, will be like that. But I feel like in this case there won't be a lot. I think a lot of people understand how good Malik Neighbors is, even though he's not Marvin Harrison Jr. He is even though he is regarded as the consensus number 2 receiver, he's a guy that's, if he plays at as high a level as he does throughout his career, he's got a chance to put on a gold jacket someday. Yeah, the linebacker position, not a strong position. Jeremiah Trotter, a guy from Clemson I kind of like. Trotter didn't kind of that old school throwback linebacker. I like Junior Colson too from Michigan. I think if you talk about a guy that's kind of a slight sleeper, if you will, it's not necessarily a deep sleeper, but a little bit of a sleeper, if you will. I think Junior Colson really fits that tag because Colson, I think, just is a guy I can just picture him being a starter in the NFL. He just, even though he's not, his movement skills aren't great. I don't think his play strength is outstanding by any means. It's very solid, but I think he's a guy that's just going to find a way to get on the field, and maybe not as a starter right away. But I think he's going to be a guy that I think NFL teams will give him the tag eventual starter. I think he's a guy that's going to be. He can have success in coverage. He's a good tackler, open field tackler. So, and a guy that just, 3-year starter in Michigan on a national championship team, made plays in big games. In the Alabama game, had a big time sack and played well against Washington. Tough as heck. Obviously that's not, a lot of guys are tough, but, Junior Cole, he was playing not just in the Alabama game. I think he had another injury in the national championship game. So you talk about a guy that's not only got traits to succeed in the NFL, a guy that's getting pushed kind of down draft boards. We'll see where NFL evaluators view him, but a guy that's, tough as heck, 3-year starter, national championship team. So a guy that really, when you list all of those things, a guy that's really got an opportunity to do something for himself in the NFL, or to carve a path in the NFL, and probably will most likely have the tag eventual starter. Maybe some NFL teams, most likely the team that probably drafts him, could have a tag on him as an immediate starter. But I think a guy that, eventual starter, probably 3rd, 4th round guy, but a guy that could be a really nice player in the National Football League. Tyler Nubin, you talk about the safety class. Tyler Nubin's an interesting guy out of Minnesota. This guy that had has been at Minnesota for a few years. Now the consensus number one safety. He's a guy that you can tell he's really refined his tackling technique. This guy that, tackling looks pretty effortless for him. So, yeah, I like his game. I think he's got a lot of high-end potential. But yeah, the safety class, not really, that's what's interesting when you kind of got a weak class, you kind of have other guys emerge, I don't mean that as any I don't mean that to kind of downplay Tyler Nubin, but that's kind of what happens when you have, a safe or a class that's not really getting talked about as much, or a safety or a class that's kind of down. You'll have one guy kind of emerge. But I think in this case, Tyler Nubin, is deserving of it. I've only really watched his highlights, briefly, but as far as tackling and ball skills and being in position to make a play, dropping into coverage, playing zone, playing like the deep half, those are all things that Tyler Nubin can do. So we'll see where he's viewed. That's what's interesting when you have a weaker class, like the running back class, safety class, kind of weaker classes. It's interesting when you have like weaker classes. Like what does that mean, like in relative to where they're going to go? Because like Nubin, even though he's viewed as the number one safety, could that mean he still falls to the end of the second round? Or Trey Benson considered the number one running back, but the running back class isn't viewed necessarily highly. Does that mean he falls to the third round? Is he late second round, third round? So what is that relative to this draft, and draft where you have some position groups like wide receiver and quarterback and defensive line that are really talked about highly? Does that mean that there's just going to be, I guess, how does that affect kind of the flow of the draft? Does that mean there's more, we're just going to see a ton of quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive linemen, even offensive linemen? The strength of the position groups go first, and we're going to push the running backs, safeties. We're going to push those guys back. Does that mean that happens? Or is there, or I guess, is there still, Nubin and, some of the guys, some of the top rated guys from the weaker position groups, if you will, do some of those guys still go? And there's, still some runs on receivers, still some runs on defensive linemen, but not as many runs. So how does that affect the flow of the draft? I think that'll be interesting. But yeah, the tight end class, talk about Cade Stover. Cade Stover is a guy I liked out of Ohio State. Big, just really, you can tell he's kind of I don't know if he grew up on a farm or not, but you can tell he's kind of got some country strength. I really like Cade Stover's game. Stover, kind of following his career at Ohio State, was a defensive player, moved to tight end. So yeah, Stover, I like Stover's game. Where he goes is to be, where he goes, the fit for him. I think that's what's interesting about Brock Bowers being the top tight end is, how does that affect some of the other tight ends? Where does that really, does Brock Bowers go, and then people kind of are just, willing to punt the tight end position for a while? Does that mean Jaleel Billingsley or is it Billingsley? What's the tight? I keep forgetting the tight end from Texas. Jatavion Sanders. Does that mean Sanders gets pushed down the board and Cade Stover gets moved? I don't know. I have a feeling that one team's really going to like Cade Stover. I think Cade Stover's kind of a fit. He's a guy that just with his, tough, gritty, tenacious, the way he plays, I think one NFL team's going to fall in love with him. So I actually will go as far as to say don't be surprised if Cade Stover's the second tight end off the board. And I talked about this before. He's kind of sneaky good at Cade Stover, is sneaky good after the catch. He's not. Is he ever going to be? Is he ever going to be Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce type of guy after the catch? Is he, or is he like on par with some of the top receivers after the catch? No, but just like, is this a guy that can just, when the team needs a play and, your top receiver's getting doubled and you got Cade Stover working the middle and he's just tough to cover because his size and stature, and he'll get down and dirty and blocking. Is Cade Stover going to carve a path in the NFL where he's that type of guy, kind of maybe that Jason Witten guy that just, will get you a tough 4-yard catch in traffic where he just hauls it in with his strength. So I think Cade Stover can be that guy. You see, tough, big physical dude, had a nice career at Ohio State. And, as a guy that just, you talk about, I don't know, it's not necessarily because I don't think he's getting discussed as much because he's not Brock Bowers. I think I'd say that factors in a little bit, but I think it's also due to the fact that like NFL teams, if you're not a talent like Brock Bowers or Travis Kelce or George Kittle or Gronk, obviously those guys didn't go top 5, top 10 like Bauer. But if you're not a talent like that, or Tony Gonzalez, if you're not a talent like that, then you're kind of, the NFL still will value you, but they don't. I think a lot of NFL evaluators don't really value that highly enough to take you top 5, top 10. Or even first round. So Cade Stover probably, he'll be one of those guys where it probably is one of the best second round picks. Like he'll probably go second, third. He might even fall early. I can see him going early third round, and people will be like, "Wow, this is one of the better picks of the third round." And this is a guy who he's not gonna necessarily wow you with the plays he's gonna make, but I think he'll be a guy that be one of those guys that the hometown fans know who he is and love him. It's kind of like kind of reminds me of a little bit of Pat Freiermuth a few years ago. It's like Pittsburgh Steelers fans love Pat Freiermuth. They always say Muth or, when he makes a catch. I think Stover will be that guy. He's not going to just make big plays on a week in and week out basis and just be a problem in a nightmare matchup, kind of like Brock Bowers, George Kittle, Travis Kelce. I mean, those guys are just true matchup nightmares. Even Laporta is almost getting to that status. I don't think he'll be that guy, but Stover, as far as a guy like Freiermuth, just making clutch catches, just your team needs 4 or 5 yards and you're throwing it on a wet, cold night, and you just you can go to Stover to get you that catch with a guy draped on him. I think Stover can be that guy. But so I just want to keep talking about Dallas Turner. I just, Michigan, I'll say this, Michigan did a good job of containing Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner, still my number 1 edge rusher. I love Dallas Turner. You look, the speed to power, the way this guy plays, I can tell the Michigan game, he was kind of frustrated. Georgia was kind of arrogant in the way they tried to block him one-on-one, and that was just not happening. And I think Turner really knew, you can tell that against Michigan, they were kind of doing things, running away from him, pulling multiple guys towards him. And, just they'd have McCarthy roll out the opposite way. Michigan knew that Michigan was smart. They understood, this guy, we're going to have to try to limit this guy if we want to win the game. That's exactly what they did because, Georgia, that was actually, I can't really place the blame on Kirby Smart, but Georgia, that was not wise to just try to block him one-on-one. There was several key pass rushing downs, key third downs where they just left Dallas Turner one-on-one, and he just feasted on that. Or not necessarily feasted, but he won some of those battles in key spots against that Georgia offensive tackle. So Dallas Turner, I love Dallas Turner, and he was just, I think the fact that Alabama was, borderline national championship good, I think that is a testament to Dallas Turner, because that says that Dallas Turner could be really good in the NFL. I know you can't really make predictions like that, but if you look at every Alabama team, like if you look at top players on every Alabama team that was an SEC championship or a playoff team that was, or borderline national title team or national title team, they always had at least one. Their top playmakers became good NFL players. Like hence the 2015 Alabama national championship team, you had Derrick Henry, really good in the NFL. Minka Fitzpatrick. Who else were some of their top key playmakers? Was that when they have Ridley then? Was Ridley there? Or was Ridley gone the year before? I think Kelvin, and then they had Kelvin Ridley too. So you look at Kelvin Ridley, Minkah Fitzpatrick, also Marlon Humphrey too. Some of their star players became really good NFL players. Not that that's going to guarantee Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Dallas Turner, their star players this year are going to be great in the NFL. But I think it certainly is a chance they will be. So, I got Mel Kiper's big board right here. Yeah, it's interesting. There's always one guy that Mel Kiper has I don't necessarily agree with. He's got Drake May pretty high. Drake May number 7. For whatever reason, I have a feeling Mel Kiper would be high on Drake May. Drake May's not a guy. But, as far as I think Mel Kiper, I think a lot of times his draft rankings are pretty close. I think he always has one or two guys ranked a little higher than they should be. But as far as his big board, I think it is pretty good. I think it is fairly close to at least what I think. Obviously, what I think, obviously, might not be right. But, Jaden Daniels, number 2. I'm not as high on Jaden Daniels yet. I think, maybe I got to dive into some more tape. I watched Jaden Daniels play this year, but to me, there's just a lot of, watching LSU fan closely or watching LSU football closely, you understand their offensive line, LSU's offensive line is very good. And not to like make that statement and then make it sound like, I'm trying to take away from Jaden Daniels, but you got to understand when you have an offensive line like that, it can make a guy who's a run-first quarterback and then pass second, if you will, kind of like how Jaden Daniels is. You can make his play like more pronounced. It can make him look even better, I guess, if you will. So I think that not that to take anything away, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. His running ability is terrific. He's improved as a passer, but when you have an offensive line that caliber, it can kind of make up for. Like, for example, if LSU had a bad offensive line this year, obviously Jaden Daniels wouldn't have had as good a season, but would his play, would he have been able to rise up to, I guess the point I'm trying to make is Jaden Daniels a good enough talent where if LSU's offensive line was average or bad, or in the NFL, if he goes to a team like Washington with an average to bad offensive line, is his talent good enough to kind of overcome the flaws of a bad O-line and average weapons? I think that's the question I have with Jaden Daniels. Like, you look at Lamar Jackson is kind of like the similar comparison to Jaden Daniels. Like, if Jaden Daniels if Lamar Jackson went to a bad franchise, like if Lamar Jackson was on the Bears right now, would he be able to, with him being kind of the claim of the run first, pass second guy, would he be able to overcome that in Chicago in the mess of their franchise currently? I don't know. I think Jaden Daniels kind of like Lamar Jackson in the sense where he needs to go to a good situation to succeed, or is this hype that he's getting because he is that good of a talent as far as a runner, and then he's improved that much as a passer and is going to continue to improve, or he can overcome all that and be good in the NFL? I think that's the question I have with Jaden Daniels, and that's why I'm not ready to rank him that highly. With that being said. But Malik Neighbors 4. I like it. He's got Marvin Harrison 3, Malik Neighbors 4. I would have Marvin Harrison the number 2 player in this draft, and then I have Neighbors. Probably have Neighbors there. But this is what I talk about, how strong the wide receivers are, because Harrison is the number 1 receiver, but he's got Neighbors right behind him at 4, and then Odunze 5. That's a testament to how strong this wide receiver group is. Like, Rome Odunze is the 3rd wide receiver. That just shows the strength of this class. Rome Odunze is the 3rd wide receiver, but the 5th overall player. It's a testament to how good of a player he really is. Like, having him the 3rd ranked wide receiver does not devalue how good of a player Odunze is. Brock Bowers, number 6 overall player. Joe Alt seemed as the consensus offensive tackle, I think, just because I think Alt's kind of like the safe pick. Fashino is a good athlete, but there was some things that I kind of not really questioned, but I don't think there's some things I can't remember off the top of my head where I didn't really like as much. Joe Alt, there's not really, I think why people like Joe Alt is, people, I guess this does not really have anything to do with scouting, but people associate a Notre Dame offensive lineman with succeeding in the NFL, because there's been a lot of good Notre Dame linemen in the past years. Quentin, or the Colts offensive lineman, and then the Liam Eichenberg's another guy for the Dolphins. He hasn't been great, but just my point, Notre Dame's had so many talented offensive linemen, and Joe Alt, there's not really a weakness to his game. I don't think, is Joe Alt going to ever be a franchise like left tackle? But is he going to be a really good starter? I think the offensive tackle position is kind of almost valued in the same light as the defensive tackle position. It's hard to find a really good, just finding a really good tackle is tough. Because a lot of NFL teams, if you're drafting a guy, a tackle or a defensive tackle in the top 5 to 10 picks, you want a really good one, because you know that the value of getting a good one, whether it's the Detroit Lions with Penei Sewell, or the 49ers with Trent Williams, or even who's another good left tackle in the NFL, whoever, Lane Johnson, the Eagle, whatever team it is, getting a really good left tackle is so valuable. Troy Fontenot from Washington, number 9, like Fontenot. I like Fontenot's game. Dallas Turner, really like his game. Brian Thomas. Yeah, Brian Thomas, he's got the 11th ranked player, number 4 receiver. I keep forgetting to talk about Brian Thomas. I really do like Brian Thomas. I think he was a guy that I kind of have to go back and reevaluate and see where I want to rank him in regards to receiver, because going into this season, he was getting some hype as one of the guys that could be one of the top, not necessarily he wasn't really talked about in the NFL draft. He was talked about as far as the NFL draft a little bit, but a lot of people were talking about him as one of the breakout players in college football. And I watched him last year, and I'm thinking, he's got a skill set where I think he could be good, but I don't know if he projects well to the NFL, because I thought he was kind of just a get open type of receiver. I didn't know he necessarily had the upside he really displayed this past season. I think that's what this, if you watch Brian Thomas tape and you just watch 2021, 2022, and you didn't watch this past year, you'd probably be like, yeah, this guy's maybe a, I don't know, 3rd, 4th round receiver, maybe a guy that can come in the NFL and be kind of like Demarcus Robinson for the Rams, a guy that can, guy that maybe will play for a few teams, guy that knows how to get open. He's not going to be a guy that's really, a threat to stretch the field and create big plays and come down with, highlight contests in traffic. He's probably not going to be that guy, but can he play in the NFL for a long time and be really good? I think that's what Brian Thomas is going to bring. Laitu Latu, 13 to UCL, or 13th overall. McCarthy, 14th. Yeah, I tend to agree. He's got Worthy, number 17th overall. Let's see his reasoning. Worthy is an electrifying player with the ball in his hands. I wrote this before he broke the NFL combine. Yeah, so my thing with, and then Arnold, Terrion Arnold. My issue with Xavier Worthy is I kind of had a hard time making this point, but in my mind it makes a lot of sense, but I'll try to reiterate it. To me, since we saw Xavier Worthy play 3 years, I think we need, if you knew Xavier Worthy were to play 3 years at Texas, big time recruit, was going to go to Michigan, went to Texas. I know that's irrelevant, but point being, big time recruit, Michigan wanted him, Texas wanted him. If you knew that he played 3 years at Texas and you knew he ran a 4.21 at the combine, you would be like, dang, this guy was just elite, off the charts. But that's not really necessarily the case. Xavier Worthy, he had a good career at Texas. Now, is there guys that have had good careers and ran times at the combine go on to have a really nice career in the NFL? But you're thinking, knowing those two things, 3-year career at Texas, I guess we'll throw that in there. If you knew those, okay, I'll say it again. If you knew those two things, that he 3-year career at Texas and ran a 4.21, you think this guy's going to be elite in the NFL. This guy's going to be the next Tyreek Hill. This guy's going to, stretch the defense, create big plays, just burn corners on almost a weekly basis in the NFL. But that may not be the case for Xavier Worthy. So I think that's why the 4.21 is definitely not going to hurt him, but it kind of puzzles you for a moment. Okay, 4.21, why didn't he dominate more? Shouldn't he have dominated more? But I think that's the thing. You look at John Ross 4.22. John Ross didn't really, he had like kind of one good season at Washington. So, the 4.22 kind of helped him go top 10 because it's like NFL teams are thinking like, man, there's got to be a lot more meat on the bone in this case. There's a potential for, greatness here. There's a lot more upside. That's what you're all thinking. So that's the case with Xavier Worthy is, knowing that he's had a good career and knowing he ran a 4.21, is that, I guess to sum up what I'm trying to say is this the ceiling for Xavier Worthy that even with a 4.21 40 that he's posted, like, is he still just going to be a good receiver? Like, he's not going to be a threat to, could he not eventually become Tyreek Hill or just an explosive weapon? Like, is he only going to be a guy where we'll see flashes of that? I think that's the question I have for Xavier Worthy. And he could definitely prove me wrong, but I also could be right. So certainly understand that he could prove me wrong, but yeah, we'll see. So that's kind of just my, I guess, slight concern with Xavier Worthy. Nate Wiggins at 23. That's interesting. Okay, let's see what he has. Let's see what his cornerback rankings are. I don't know why he's not as high on. Not sure why he's not as high on Nate Wiggins. Okay. This is interesting, his cornerback ranking. I'll be honest, the more and more I watch the cornerback ranking, I think his cornerback rankings may be spot on because you talk Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold may be my number one. I think Mitchell may be number two. And then the more I watch of Cooper DeJean, the more I really like him. And if he is viewed as a corner, I think that he probably is the number 3 corner. So, yeah, as crazy as this sounds, I think I do have Nate Wiggins, maybe my number 4 corner now, excuse me. So, yeah, that's interesting. I think Mel Kiper, so you got to give Mel Kiper credit. I think he is pretty honest. I think, like, if someone said, like, a month or two ago, before, like, the Pro Bowl, before Quinyon Mitchell had the Pro Bowl or what he did at the Senior Bowl rise, and people knew what him and Arnold did, before, Arnold was getting more hype. Before all that, I think some people would be like, what the heck, Quinyon Mitchell, number 1 corner, Terrion Arnold, number 2 corner, and then he's got Kool-Aid McKinstry all the way down at number 8 corner. I think before all this stuff happened, the Combine, the Senior Bowl, more people, NFL evaluators now, I think a lot of people would think this is crazy, that Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold 1 and 2, but as more information comes out, I think that's very accurate. And then Cooper DeJean, boy, I watched Cooper DeJean's tape and I'm like, okay, but then I watched his highlights from this past season. I'm thinking like, this guy got even better. I think he combined his already talented skill set. So yeah, I actually think these rankings may be spot on for the corner. I would probably maybe put Arnold number 1 corner, Quinyon Mitchell 2, Cooper DeJean 3, Wiggins 4. TJ Tampa from Iowa State, I got to get into his tape, but I'd probably have Kool-Aid higher. Mike Sanders still number 10. Sanders still, I haven't watched his tape, but I watched Mike Sanders still play almost every game in Michigan. Sanders still kind of a similar thing with Cooper DeJean. Where do you want to play him? Do you want to play him on the outside? Do you want to play him at the nickel? Sanders still phenomenal nickel corner. And one thing, I guess, even though this isn't reviewed as highly, Mike Sanders still just a terrific tackler. But we'll keep talking. It's got J.C. Latham, the number 2 tackle. Yeah, I like Latham. Fuaga from Oregon State. Some people have him up there as like maybe the number 2 tackle. Got him in the number 4. Tight ends, yeah, Cade Stover. Cade Stover seems like a lock at the number 3 tight end. Jatavian Sanders. It's interesting. Jatavian Sanders. No one has. I'm almost ready to put Stover ahead of Jatavian Sanders. I like Sanders. I think Sanders gets kind of a boost because he was a 5-star athlete on a really good team, and he's a good blocker. I think that's why Jatavian Sanders kind of gets the bump. I don't think he's not as good of a receiving threat as I thought he would be. You think about 5-star guy. at Texas, tight end in a Sarkisian offense. You think this guy kind of lit it up as far as a receiving threat, but that's not necessarily the case for Sanders. But Sanders certainly can block. I have to go back and watch some more of his tape. Certainly can block, aggressive guy, big physical, muscular build. So, yeah, I like Sanders, but I don't know. I really like Cade Stover, and obviously Brock Bowers is, made, he's really has quite the body of work to be the number one. And they have running backs, Jonathan Brooks, 1, Jalen Wright, Tennessee. I got to watch Jalen Wright's. I got to watch his tape. And then Blake Corum, 4. Yeah, I kind of like that he's putting Blake Corum up there. Blake Corum, to me, it kind of, some people won't remember this comparison, but Blake Corum, you kind of get vibes of Mike Hart going back to Michigan. I think Blake Corum's a little more, or has a little bit better movement skills. I think that's what's going to propel him to be better in the NFL. But if you remember, Mike Hart played in the NFL for a year or two, but just, I think he ran like 4.7, just wasn't a fast guy. I think Blake Corum's a guy that just understands the running back position, been well coached by Mike Hart, actually. I think Corum will be good in the NFL, but I think he'll be, having the boost of the offensive line at Michigan helped. I think Corum's a guy who's going to be, I think he could be like a strong backup running back in the NFL, maybe play for a few different teams. I don't think, he'll ever be like that kind of that bell cow for a team. Obviously, NFL teams use, multitude of different backs. But, yeah, I think Corum will be a strong, RB, a strong backup in the NFL. I think he'll have some upside. But to say he's going to be a bell cow and dominate in the NFL, I think is a stretch of the imagination. But, yeah, I like Corum's game. And, he'll be an interesting guy to watch, too. So, thanks for tuning in to the Brand Partial Show. Stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.